Welcome to Friendly Station. I am Desire, and today my guest is a pioneer expert on resurrection plants that literally come back from the dead. She is a professor of molecular and cell biology at the University of Cape Town, and her list of accolades is astounding. She's won some of the most prestigious science awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award at the 2025 National Research Foundation Awards. She's also appeared on several TED Talks, one of which now has over 200,000 views, and has also made an appearance on The Espresso Show. She's one famous scientist, and what an honor it is to have her. And since today is Halloween, I felt it fitting to talk about plants that come back from the dead. So please enjoy Professor Jill Farrant. Hey, this is Desire Mia.
And Ntokozo Mloto.
And this is
Friendlyzation.
Afternoon. Just a quick sound check. Are you able to hear me?
I am, and I have very primitive cell phone headphones in. I don't have headphones. I'm an old lady. Come on, I'm from the boomer era.
Wonderful.
And I don't do social media, so I'm really struggling here. But anyway, lovely to meet you.
Likewise. Well, you're not the only one who's had a problem for this whole day. I was trying to find my notes, and then it happens that the printing system swallowed all my printing credits. So right now I'm using my phone, and I'm hoping for the best.
Well, that's fine. I mean, maybe you can fill me in on a couple of things. I assume that you can edit everything we say afterwards. So.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, by the way, I just want to start by congratulating you for your lifetime achievement at the 2025 National Research Foundation Awards. I did not know you are a renowned scientist. Now I'm intimidated. My goodness.
No, don't be. I've actually had a very lucky journey, which I do attribute to a power greater than myself. And I have had, I've had several awards for my work. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, you have had several awards. I've seen them. And also, I must say, you do kind of look cool. I don't know if you've, gotten that from people, especially students.
Not anymore. When I was young,
yeah,
they always thought, and they always called me the rock star. Now they call me what a scientist normally looks like at my age. More sort of casual in my dress, don't have the funky haircut. I do always wear a feather. That's a sort of hallmark in respect for my dad.
Yeah.
But I've had my time where I did dress very funkily, as it were, for a professor.
Exactly. And I was going to say that your look at that time was very much approachable to students. If you looked like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I think. And I must say, I can't help but think that you and I could have had a lecturer-student relationship because UCT was one of the places I had applied to. But life happened, but I found myself here. So, but it's not bad. I really do enjoy my time here at UP. It's relatively closer to home than it would have been otherwise.
Okay, now you've intrigued me. I didn't realize. I mean, I didn't do my background on you guys. I just trusted. So you're at University Pretoria?
Yes, I am at Tux.
Yes, Tux, what used to be Tux, yeah. No, it's a very good university, Spirit. Well done. And where do you originate from? Limpopo or?
No.
I mean, are you still feeling in home now?
I'm adjusting to the environment. I'm from Joburg, so UP is relatively hot than Joburg. The climate here tends to cause me to have, conjunctivitis at times, or even hay fever, which are conditions I actually didn't know I have up until recently. But nonetheless, wow. I'm enjoying it.
And it's quite close to each other.
That's
yes.
Weird.
Wow.
These are just places that are a few kilometers apart, but the weather is just almost different.
Huge. Yeah, well done. So
Limpopo, that is the province you grew up in, and that is where we find the inspiration behind the plant desiccation. Where you mentioned that as a young girl, you went out before and after rain, and then you found that a plant that was previously dry at first, but after some rain, it started to pick up and came back to life. How did you know that that plant was dead? Because for me, I would have imagined maybe it's like a turgor pressure. It has lost turgor pressure, so it's just flaccid, just flat instead of it being completely old.
Yeah, no, to answer your question, it looked dead. So I was a farmer's daughter, very aware of the effect of weather on my dad's mood and how good our crop's going to be, etc., etc. And so I spent a lot of time going around the farm with him and picking up and absorbing what a good a live plant and a dead plant looks like. And it looked so dead. I mean, it was as dead as a doornail. And that's why we call them resurrection plants, because they seem to resurrect from what looks like a dead state, but they're not dead.
Well, I would have thought they were dead and just went about my day. But well, lucky for you, you came across and then you observed and then you saw a change and like, no, man, something happened here. So that is what piqued your interest. And then further on, you went on to pursue that interest, which is quite interesting because some of us have had interest during our childhood, but eventually we have pivoted, we have changed. We're no longer pursuing our childhood dreams for many reasons, but you went on and pursued it at the University of KZN, which I must say is quite a change in environment, given that KZN is like a relatively high rainfall area, whereas Limpopo is more arid. And so, and then you also went there to do what I will call a degree trifecta from an undergrad, MSc and a PhD.
All the way through. It was weird. I chose UKZN, and at that point, I hadn't remembered my childhood memory. I just was passionate about plants. And I chose it for personal reasons. I think the fees were almost non-existent compared to other universities where I'd been accepted, and I wanted to save my dad from some money. And I happened to bump into a very amazing professor who looked at something that was very new and novel in those days on the opposite of desiccation tolerance, the opposite of what I'm now a specialist of, but it's in seeds. And, 90% of our seeds in the world are just like a resurrection plant. They're dry, they look dead. You yourself know if you're going to plant this thing, you have to add water.
Yes.
And miraculously it germinates, right? Well, it's that we call it desiccation tolerant. It can lose all its water and not die. And the 10% of our seeds in the world literally don't do that. They don't dry down, and if you dry them, you kill them. And the reason for that is in their life, they grow in quite a wet, humid environment, either a swamp or in the tropical forests. There's no need to dry out. They've got no environment to have to escape. They might as well germinate straight away. And so they send live and wet babies into the soil. And if you try and dry them, you can't, that you just kill them. So you actually can't store them, because in the world, the way we store seeds is they've got to be dry, extremely dry. And then you can put them at minus 20, minus 80 degrees centigrade, and you can store them for millions of years. You can't do that to any of these other seeds, which we now have called recalcitrant, because that means obstinately disobedient. Anyway, so I was tasked to find out why we can't store these seeds. Why are they sensitive to drying? And I built up information during my master's in particular. Took a brief break for a year to go and pay back a bursary by working with the CSIR in Stellenbosch, and then decided I wanted to go back and answer more questions. So that's why I went back to UKZN and did my PhD there. And we've now understand the answers. But here's a fact: of the seeds that we have in the world that you can't ever store, there's coffee. Now, coffee's been threatened hugely by climate change. What if we can't store coffee? Today we can't. We will wipe out coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be a horrible thing.
Especially for me, as a coffee lover.
Yeah.
I can imagine someone from the future without a coffee. That is crazy.
Yeah. But others, mango, avocado pear, lychee, a lot of things that we love and love to eat, we can't store them. We have to germinate the seeds immediately.
Yes.
And that's the only way we store them is in the land.
So is there a way for the remaining 90% of seeds to then be stored like the other 10% you mentioned? Or is
Yes.
it just bye-bye, no more such fruit for the future generations?
If we can't store them, and there are increasing more ways, and I've in the background been working with that along my life, there is a way, and it's not going to be as conventional as you use for the 90%, but we are getting there, and now getting there even genetically. So we can actually modify the seeds to make them storable.
I see. And before we get into the beyond the superficial level of your work, I just want to touch a bit about your journey initially. So this research you've undertaken has taken you more than 3 decades, I can imagine, almost more longer than I have been alive. So would you So would you say that has been like a test of your commitment to this whole research that you finding resurrection plants?
Absolutely. I often say that I'm very lucky that I do a job that I'm passionate about. I have a very questioning brain. I love nature, and I want to understand how it works. And I love solving problems for humanity, and both the PhD research and the subsequent research can help in food security in the era of climate change. Now, when I was a youngster and deciding to do all of these things, climate change wasn't really a big thing to think about. But as I've matured and continue to do this research, I realize more and more that it's highly valuable. And I think that's why the world has recognized me. I didn't do it deliberately. I mean, I did it deliberately because I was a farmer's daughter and wanted to help my dad,
Yeah.
But it's how higher power works.
And I must say, you really, you placed yourself correctly in the timeline, because lo and behold, you did mention in 2015, which was 10 years ago, the FAO, which is the Food and Agricultural Organization, predicted that we needed to generate, at that time, 70% of our agricultural production to meet the food security. And that was in 2015. So now it's 10 years later, and now we are at 8 billion people. Probably even more people have fallen into abject poverty. So how much now do we need? So this is
way worse. Way worse. It's actually very, very critical. And I was very fortunate to be invited to join a Nobel laureate conference in 2022 in Saudi Arabia, where the whole thing of the conference was, what 10 solutions do we need to take to make our planet survivable in our century? And I was invited completely by from the floor. I didn't have anything planned to say what I needed to say, and I talked about food security, and I talked about the fact that the global warming, the number of the population, all of those kind of things. If we don't do radical things right now, we're in trouble. And radical things take time, and they take money. And that has to be recognized in the world, because you can't do something like breed a whole drought-tolerant crop in 2 days. It's not IT.
I do have to mention that, to eradicate food security, whether in 2030 or any time in the future, it's going to need a multifaceted approach. I'm talking about your research in resurrection plants. That's one of them. And most of the research that has been done lately is they have figured that even herding of cattle grazing is detrimental to the environment, because as you know, livestock themselves release greenhouse gases. So if meat will not be able to meet the demand, then we have plants to pivot to. So they are going to be, like you mentioned, they are the base level of our food pyramid. So they are the ones that are going to have to supplement this additional food need if meat cannot. And so I just want to ask to get into the research now. Like I've mentioned, I've alluded initially that when you mentioned resurrection plants, I had the idea that they aren't technically dead, because I've never came across one, or maybe I have and other people might have as well. But I thought they were just flaccid, without turbo pressure, like water has been completely removed. So
that's the truth.
Yeah.
Turbo pressure has all been removed, and yet they don't die. which is amazing.
And so do these resurrecting plants, do they look like how they would in autumn and winter? Or so it's not the same thing, it's completely different.
They look exactly the same all year round. In the rainy season, which for the most of them is in summer, they look just like either a grass, because there are a couple of grasses. There's some other monocots with fairly broad leaves. There are some dicots, small dicots. They look like just anything on earth. You wouldn't actually know until they dry down. And when they dry down, you'd probably think, that's just a dead grass.
Exactly.
So there's no way, unless you go around watering these dead grasses, there's no way of knowing whatsoever.
So you're listening, people, water, you might not know, maybe that plant isn't really dead. You know, people, once they see something dead, they'll be like, let's chuck it in the bin and just call it a day. So you might never know. That might be something that can resurrect. And to be honest, I never thought of dead plants being able to resurrect. Like, I thought like once dehydration heats, then it's chai, you know, like that means it's over.
Yeah.
So please take me through the mechanisms these plants employ to bring themselves back to life. And is it all plants or a certain kind of plants?
No, it's actually an incredibly rare phenomenon. So in the flowering plants, there are only 0.009% of plants can do this. So very rare, and they occur in fairly unique environments, normally on soils that are very poor, even rocks themselves, that have good summer rains, good rains, but then a long period of dry. And that's the way you can pick them out. Now, South Africa has probably more known varieties. There might be a whole lot of unknowns because this is a relatively new field than anywhere else in the world. And so I've been very lucky to look at a whole lot of different ones. And I've whittled it down to, to me, it's such a rare phenomenon. There was so little known when I first came into the field that I decided to take what we call a fundamental approach. To look at the fundamentals, using a multidiscipline approach. So I looked at everything, how they cope with the environment, what is their physiology, what do they look like deep inside, what are the genes like, well, how do they express those genes, what do the genes code for, how does this protect the plant, and then can we make use of this to make crops more like them. And that's just taken the bulk of my research because it's literally a lot of different things being done at the same time, but each of those techniques are evolving as I am getting older and older. So things that weren't even present in my PhD, we do them now, and we just keep adding and adding. And it's only now that I've got a really comprehensive understanding of exactly what's happening can I make what I call meaningful suggestions to improve crops, drought tolerance of crops. It's been a long, lovely process, because I think every discovery for a scientist is like, oh my goodness, it's like a complete dream come true.
And we love.
I don't know if I've answered your question. I kind of deviated a little bit from that, but about the mechanisms, let me go into that a bit now. It became quite evident to me early on, and to other scientists, so I can't credit this entirely to myself, that what they do is in their leaves and their roots, they turn on genes that were actually designed in the first instance in seeds. So I've already told you 90% of our plants produce seeds that are dry. That means they're desiccation tolerant and alive, just like a resurrection plant. So we believe resurrection plants have just taken the same genes. They haven't made new genes, but they've modified them to be able to be expressed in a vegetative tissue and turn them on in the leaf and root. Now, the implication of that is, if that's true, every single crop that we have on this planet can be desiccation tolerant if we know how to turn the genes on. Because they're in the genome. You can't take them out of the genome. So if we can, by techniques like CRISPR-Cas, actually turn on key regulatory networks, we can actually make a maize crop or a wheat crop or a sorghum crop behave like a resurrection plant. in theory, and I'm on that path.
And I want to mention that, like you did mention earlier, when you said like things have changed along the way, things that were not existing during the beginning of this research, and now are here. Some of them are sequencing. It used to take almost days or years to sequence a single human genome. Now it's a matter of minutes. So things are changing. So surely we can get right there on time, or even earlier. And also just to
but can I interrupt you before you say and also?
Sure.
The big limiting thing is money.
Absolutely.
These techniques cost, and people have to believe in your research in order to give you the money to do it.
And why wouldn't they believe at this? Because the forecasting results are there. It shows that where we're heading wouldn't be ideal for the average human being. Surely that should be the motivator, but clearly it isn't.
It is not. I actually very luckily was invited. Well, again, I think I've been invited to many places where I would never have thought of going, to a World Bank conference in Ireland some years back, 2016. And they actually put me into a group to actually brainstorm how research like mine, which is still not before even proof of concept, it's very pioneering, but it hasn't, there's still more money that's required to put it into the market. How can that work? And we came to the conclusion that under the current status, no one will employ you unless you come with proof of concept, which means I have to have the money to do the research to the point where I can say, I can now prove that this is a drought-tolerant crop. So it's tricky, but you keep pushing. Keep trying because you're passionate. And absolutely.
Truth be told, passion is the only thing that will keep us going. And one thing I have in common with you is that I don't think myself also going to retire in the future. We're not going to retire, is that true? No. Absolutely not.
No.
Not a chance.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what you remind me of so much is my beautiful students, because they keep me going. And they are the hands that are doing the work right now. So I believe very, very strongly in the upcoming generation. They are future leaders. You are our future leaders. And yeah, we hope to hell we've done a good job to make you good leaders.
Much appreciated. And I also want to, go back to what we were talking about, if you don't mind. And the reason I asked why, I asked you if it's, almost all the plants that have this, desiccation mechanism, is that my lecturer, Prof. van Staden, last year gifted me 4 types of plants. Some of them were flowering plants, others succulents, and only, 2 of the 4 survived. And now I'm scared to tell her. So I don't know. I actually don't know what the reason. So I'm just going to keep quiet. But I do hope is that they were not resurrecting plants. So that it could be the only reason. Because,
No.
Yeah.
No. The only way you'd be able to disprove that theory is to give them some water and see what happens. If they don't come alive, sorry for you. Somehow. But you know what? I'm sure she didn't give it to you as a test. It was more as I appreciate you gesture.
Honestly, I did try to resurrect, some of them, because I figured she might want a feedback of how are they going so far. Okay. So, but fortunately, well, she hasn't progressed with the course with me, so she might not remember.
I know that this is not necessarily part of our interview, but do you know what they were? A succulent you can't really kill.
Okay.
It's difficult. And the other 3? It's okay.
It's okay. But I do feel bad. I should probably tell her. I'm going to tell her and ask her what those plants were so I can revisit that. So the desiccation mechanisms that are used by these plants, do you think sometimes they are or have evolved from plants that are found or that are endemic in arid environment because, they're accustomed to a water scarce environment, or are they also found in tropical regions? Can they be found everywhere across the world?
Most of them are found in more arid regions and seasonally arid regions. There are a couple one or two in the more tropical areas. In fact, they've been quite a surprise to us working in the field that you can get a plant. And the thought about one in particular is that it was desiccation tolerant. It then got into an environment that's very mesic, and it's just not bothering to switch those genes on anymore. It's behaving. But if you force it to, it will. So in the tropics, you've really got to go around forcing plants to dry down in the first place.
We'll be right back. And we're back. You also indicated that these are GMO. And this is my understanding, you'll correct me if I am wrong, is that there are 3 groups of plants. The first group already has these genes, these resurrection genes present, and they're able to upregulate them when the time needs or when they're faced with the stress, which is drought. And then we have the second group of plants. They have these genes, however, they are not expressed in their vegetative tissues. And so they would need to have an inducible promoter in order for them to transcribe these genes that will facilitate the desiccation tolerance. And then we have the third group of plants that have neither of those genes, and therefore will need to be, there'll be transgenic organisms in order for them to have these genes in their genome. That is, you're taking them from a different organism and then inserting it into these plants that don't have these genes at all. I must say, people do have a reluctance to have GMO foods in their cupboards because they don't know, the effects of the long-term effects of eating GMOs. But really, we have been eating GMOs. Think of cow or cattle. It has been through conventional methods being interbred to form, livestock with the most meat or cows with the most milk production. So it has been something that has been in existence, us eating the GMOs.
Yes, you're correct in many ways. Of course, as a scientist, I'll come in and say some caveats along the way. If you look at, let's just skip with the animal example. And remember, I'm not an animal scientist. Here's an example. Every single dog on this planet comes from one ancestor, which humans have bred to get all the varieties. Now, that's not by changing, altering genes specifically as in a precise manner. That's just throwing all the genes together and hoping what you come out of. So we've modified pretty much everything ourselves on this planet. We breed 75 years for bigger seed and more yield. The original ancestors are tiny weed-like plants, and we don't consider them genetically modified. Now, what I'm trying to do is not go the route where I put an artificial gene, or not gene, a real gene from a resurrection plant into a maize plant. I have started that. Other people have taken it further, and that's kind of classified as the naughty one. Even though that gene that they have put into that plant is in every plant anyway, and they all plants anyway. The route that I'm saying that we must or should go further is you don't change genes that are in the organism whatsoever. They're there, right? Now, every plant that produces a dry seed has genes for desiccation tolerant. So they're there. I don't have to put them in, but I need to wake them up under a drought. Normal crops, normal plants out there have different ways of coping with weather. They either close their stomata so that they don't lose water. There's a whole lot of things that they do. And they do it so efficiently that, in fact, drying down like a resurrection plant is expensive and it hasn't been opted for by most plants. Now, because the genes are in the what we call sensitive plants, virtually all the plants on our planet, but they're not switched on. The CRISPR approach goes to saying, I know how this gene's regulated through a very active molecular process. I can just and you permanently. The switching off means you can take away a lot of the damaging reactions that occur. And it's not putting a gene in, it's not putting a promoter in, it's not doing anything. It's actually going into the gene and saying to the gene, listen, never mind what, if you get your normal signals, don't switch on. Or, listen, you're not used to switching on in this situation. Right now, I'm telling you, switch on. So I'm not modifying the plant. I'm just modifying the way it works.
And so you mentioned that, group B of plants, or the second group of plants, like I've mentioned, are those that have these genes. They're essentially not induced. So as a result, they are not GMOs because they already have these genes.
Yeah, exactly.
But even in the third groups of plants that don't have these resurrection genes, we insert them, but we don't touch the housekeeping genes. So, but I think those are the ones that will be considered transgenic.
They would be, even though in theory every plant has those genes. So even though you're inserting a gene from a resurrection plant, you're inserting it into the genome that already has that. But that gene is not normally switched on. So you're kind of bypassing a lot of regulatory features just by putting a gene in under a promoter that will, in our instance, is only switched on by drought. So it's not, you don't have to give it a chemical or anything to work. It would be modified in a very slight way. It'll just have more copies of the same gene that it's already got anyway.
Yeah.
So the chances that it's going to be dangerous are low, but in fact, as a consequence of all the legislation, this project that has got the inserted genes is under field trials. It's going into every single test that you could possibly give it. Is it safe for animals to eat? Is it safe for humans to eat? Even though we're not touching what's going on in the seed itself.
Yeah.
We're touching what's going on in the leaves. And you don't eat maize leaves much, kind of thing. It is safe. And I think the big thing about GMOs, is it ethical? That's my question. Is what I'm doing ethical? If what I'm doing is going to damage anything or anyone, then it's not ethical. If it's going to help people, humanity, and animals, it's ethical. But I have stopped that type of research a while back, personally.
I see. And, and this might come across as a dumb question, so I do have to, ask for your forgiveness in advance. So, because we're now inserting additional genes in the third groups of plants, would that not exhaust the organism, like when it has to use those genes, because now it has a larger genome than its ancestors were used to?
It might have consequences. I'm not going to say exhaust. The larger genome is not a problem because, in fact, everything on this planet has a genome way, way, way bigger than the genes it actually uses. In humans, it's phenomenal. I think we use 20% of our entire genome in active processes. And plants have got way bigger genomes than humans. And so it's not a burden of having too many genes. The burden is if that gene, while it's being active, stresses the plant in any other way, or causes the plant to have used more energy to transcribe those genes, then it might be a distress to the plant. But the realization of the whole thing is that overall, the plants perform better. So there isn't really any perceived stress. Overall, they can survive a 3-week drought, whereas beforehand they could survive only a 1-week drought. So are they being stressed? I don't think so.
And I do like this reassuring language, because we need to demystify all these scientific endeavors, because we don't want people to think everything they consume that is GMO, or we don't know its potential effects, everyone will assume it's carcinogenic, and that is a bad word.
I agree.
No one wants that.
I agree, but we need to pacify the public. But how we need to do that is by educating them.
So and through the podcast as well.
Label. That's why podcasts are brilliant. That's why I'm talking to you, because if we educate the public that that it's got this perception of it's evil, you'll get cancer, because there are some studies that in unethically done studies could have led to that. But if we really need to utilize this in a safe, very important, ethical way, it could actually help humanity.
And now, so let's say as predicted by the FOA or any other organization that talks about the increase in aridity of South Africa. Wouldn't, because Cape Town or much of the coastal areas of the South Africa receive cyclone or mid-latitude cyclone rainfall, would that also not contribute to sort of alleviating the destruction of drought? Or would it simply be, well, it's minuscule, so...
No, in some instances, but to qualify that question, what happens in KwaZulu-Natal is way more important than what happens in Cape Town, because Cape Town is not a big farming area. They do have wheat and some others, but our major grain growing areas is in the Free State, Transvaal, and Durban. Now, climate change is going to do a number of things. One of the things is what we call extended droughts. So droughts that will go on not for 1 week or 2 weeks, but maybe 3, 4, or 5. And any crop will die under those circumstances. They're just not bred for that. If you overwater a crop by a sudden cyclone, you're also going to kill it, because too much water is also a bad thing. Same as for us humans. For a long time, when you're a race runner, you know that you've got to hydrate. But there's been a lot of well-defined and described cases where if you rehydrate too much, you also can kill yourself. So keeping your water balance is hugely important if you're a human, an animal, or a plant.
And other stressor for plants, apart from overhydration, dehydration, we have photosynthesis. I just couldn't believe photosynthesis on its own. This whole, functional part of the plant is going to one that causes its fatality. Mm-hmm. Because, like you've mentioned, photosynthesis, let's say during a period of drought, causes the production of reactive oxidized species.
Exactly. Well done.
Thank you. I did my homework there. So this is why essentially these resurrecting plants sort of put on these solar light blocking pigments so that it does not photosynthesize during its period of drought.
Absolutely. They undergo not only laying those pigments down, they do a whole lot of complicated leaf movement so that they minimize the light intake. And then a whole group of them just decide, I'm breaking down my entire photosynthetic apparatus. I'm going to pretend I'm a seed, which doesn't have it. And I'll wait until everything's good again, and then I'll remake it. So they opt out entirely. Whereas the others say, okay, well, I'm going to literally put sunblock on and get minimum exposure.
I don't want this tedious process of having to resynthesize my thylakoids and all those systems, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Which approach are we using when creating these resurrecting plants? Are we using the first approach where they just put pigments and just protect their thylakoids, or the latter?
At the moment, that's the one I'm pushing for, because every single plant on this planet tends to keep its chlorophyll. I mean, it's a normal reaction. So if we can say, okay, you're going to keep it, you don't want to have these complicated genetic mechanisms of breaking it down and remaking it. Let's just protect what you have. So that's the method I'm going.
Oh, okay. I think it will be beneficial, because having to resynthesize thylakoids, it will be tedious for the plant, and will also be a slow process. Whereas food is already constantly in demand. So I do think that is a smart approach.
Exactly.
I've learned quite a few words during my research for this recording. There are two terms I've learned. First part is called homeohydric, and the other one is called poikilohydric. Is in that the first term means that we need constant water supply for us to stay alive, whereas the other one means no dehydration tolerance. And do you think as we go along in this evolutionary processes, human beings, and this is outside of your forte, I do understand, but do you think human beings might pivot from being homeohydric to the other one?
No,
not at all.
Sorry, I can be quite firm with that. We are very complex beings, and plants, as much as I try to praise how much more sentient they are than we normally think, with humans, animals, the nervous system is what needs also to be protected. I don't, and we're too big. We are much too big. I don't think it'll ever happen over evolutionary time whatsoever.
And the reason I'm asking this is everyone is always in the pursuit of longevity or,
Yeah.
forever living on this planet. So I just wanted to see, so what
Yeah.
happens on plants? Can it be translated to human beings or animals? So clearly not.
Ironically, yes. Ironically, yes. Not as in I can survive as a corpse and come alive again. Not ever. But if we learn the secrets of plants, we can actually, what everyone goes for, extend our youth. So two things that I'm quite involved in, have been involved in. I work for Giorgio Armani Skincare Cosmetics as a contractor. The extract from one of the plants that I work with completely and utterly reduces wrinkles. And we know this in L'Oreal, retinol and hyaluronic acid and all of those things. But yeah, we can actually gain youth, or the perception of youth anyway, by using plants. Also, if we eat healthily, we are likely to live longer.
And also healthy doesn't mean like, a certain diet following, but also has to do with eating with certain quantities. We don't have to overdo it or underdo it, because let me make an example here. Maybe one person wants to, take in a lot of protein to supplement their muscle mass. But protein, when it's broken down, it causes the production of, urea, and that can be toxic, right, for the body.
Yeah.
And so we need to have, I forgot what it's called, balance. So eating small quantities, people don't overdo it.
Yeah. But also, just to get a plug for plants in again, they're the source of most of your vitamins and fiber. And if you don't have fiber in your colon, you can kill yourself.
Can I?
You can, I promise you. Here's a fact. Elvis Presley was diagnosed as the drug overdose, but what really, really killed him, according to the medical doctors, is that the drugs he took made him constipated. And he actually died on the toilet.
Oh, yes, I was going to say that.
Not being able to pass stool. His drugs made him constipated, and he didn't eat fiber.
Well, fortunately for me, I had one this morning. I had Weet-Bix.
There we go. But eating a carrot a day is good enough for you,
Or an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does your then research translate into application? What do people, let's say, for example, the subsistence farmer, what do they get? Do they get seeds, or do they get plants that have already undergone this process?
Yeah. Ironically, something I haven't spoken about yet, but is what I am way more advanced in, because it's quicker and it'll be out in the market, I'm sure, within a couple of years, is that as a life scientist, you will realize that there are lots of microbes and fungi and viruses in this world, and we actually can't see them, so we don't know what the hell they're doing. Now, in the soil, there are millions and millions of these, and they can actually help a plant, or they could destroy a plant. And looking at our resurrection plants, we have isolated bacteria in particular that are just like the plant. They're desiccation tolerant. They help the plant survive excess water loss. And the plant gives them a bit of energy, but they themselves protect the plant.
So it's a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. And so we are making what we call a biostimulant, a cocktail of bacteria that when you plant your seed, or we can coat your seed with it before you get it to the farmer, your plant has got a much bigger chance of making a deep root system, which will help it cope with drought, and have defenses against water loss. So, that's no genetic modification whatsoever. That's taking use of what's already out there in nature and supplying specific doses of these bacteria, because they don't occur in normal crops, they only occur with resurrection plants, 2 crops, making the crops way more tolerant and growing better, more seed, all sorts of things. I mean, it's like a 2-for-1 strategy. And the other thing it does is it adds nutrients to the soil. So you never have to use chemical fertilizers ever again. And the problem with chemical fertilizers are they are messing up our soil and in many ways our water supply, and contributing to greenhouse gases. So here's the simplest solution of all. Use bacteria. I know.
Interesting. Mind blown. Let me just tell you that.
Yes, me too. That's exactly what I think.
And so, how far are we from rolling out this research? Because this was 10 years ago when you said you needed funds so that you can show proof of concept and eventually rolling it out. But how far are we from today? It's 2025.
2025, I'm going to gamble and predict that my biostimulants will be out by the end of 2030, even before. The modified crops are going to take a lot longer because it's not just the process of doing it, which has become easier. It's all the GMO testing you have to do. Field trials, animal trials, human trials, and all of those kind of things. And it's not exactly the easiest thing we're trying to do anyway. So, it won't be in my working lifetime, but I'll have set up enough people with the expertise and hopefully with the passion to continue doing this work after I retire.
And I do hope that I myself can somehow one day contribute through my genetic information, because I do love genetics. It's actually my favorite subject thus far.
Okay,
so I
good.
do hope I'll continue this endeavor, because I too also share your goal of eradicating extreme poverty, because it is really violation of a human right.
You're right.
And I do hope other, people are going to, it's going to be a multiple side approach. It won't just be us having to increase production.
Exactly.
Think about food redistribution, reducing food waste, because those are some of the factors that can, play, just not one part, but it's a multifaceted approach.
Exactly. And I'm loving the way you're thinking. Grateful that you decided to approach me. And I want to wish you all the best in your future. I hope this contributes to something that's really good for you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if I should ask you, but do you think there might be, an update in the future where we might have another conversation of how far since, 2025?
Yes, let's say that. Let's do that. When I've got something extra that I can actually add to you, I'm going to get hold of you.
All right. So, Prof, thank you so much for gracing us.
Thank you for the privilege. Take care.
Likewise.
Bye.
New episodes out every second week on Fridays. And don't forget to follow Friendly Session on @FriendlySession on your favorite social media platform.